This will work a little bit better. So we've titled this discussion A Peek into Tomorrow, and the next big thing in app development. Clearly, we've seen a massive set of changes that have been going on for the last 2 years in app development, and we've been participating in that. And so when we say that it's a peek into the next big thing, it's important to understand exactly what that means. I've had the privilege of being able to deliver this presentation a couple of times. And when English is your second language, it's understandable that there's occasionally a typo in the way that it's presented. Unfortunately, when English is your only language and there's a typo in your title, it says something else. So just to clarify, this is a peek. And a peek is a summit, a peek is to stimulate interest, and a peek is a glimpse. We've only got a little bit of time, but what I hope to do is to show you what I think will become the next apogee in app development. It is going to be a new summit in app development, and it's going to represent a good opportunity for all of us, hopefully. I'm new to Alcatel-Lucent, and I wouldn't mind doing a bit of a survey, and then I'll also share a bit of my background as well. How many people are overhead? They work with an app software development house, but they're not directly producing apps. They're business people, lawyers, accountants. Okay, cool, brilliant. How many people have apps that have been published? They're a developer, you've actually written it or contributed to some part of it. Okay. How many people have apps that have been published within Apple's Apps iStore? Okay. Android Marketplace? Cool. Other marketplace? Okay. Is that Windows or Symbian? Yeah, there we go. Okay. Good, so this is a huge, good cross-section in terms of what we're seeing, and that's actually very interesting. Because one of the things that Alcatel-Lucent does is we do a lot of the back-end work working with carriers, providing systems and services to carriers around the world. And when I joined the company, our marketing services team gave me this diagram as an example of how we make complex diagrams. And literally, when I saw this, I took the attitude of, oh goodness, I think we may have made the wrong decision here. Because this is not me. This is not my background. This is not the stuff that I do. This is all very interesting, and it's all important for all of us, but it's incredibly complex and it's unapproachable. And everything we do is complex, and that's because it has to be. If you know a thing about Alcatel-Lucent, what happens after we create systems is they get bolted into somebody's rack, they get buried under the streets, or they get dropped to the bottom of the ocean. So they have to work right. And so we pride ourselves in creating technology that works right all of the time. So the question becomes, is how do you make mere mortals, like people like you and me, get access to all of this fancy carrier equipment? And what can you do with all of that carrier equipment, right? I like to think of it as the world's largest cell phone. In talking with the marketing folks, that's not a very sellable proposition. People don't want the world's largest cell phone. But this is a huge bit of technology. We'd love to be able to figure out how to use it. So the way you do it is through network enablers. Because the way that the carriers speak is they speak in all sorts of proprietary languages. Espresso, Parlay, ParlayX. We don't know that. We talk SOAP, we talk REST, we don't talk ParlayX. So you need some way to be able to communicate from the way that the web development and the web developers work to the way that the carrier works. And you need to be able to expose all of these complex carrier protocols through network enablers so that developers can write apps that consumers are going to buy. So why is that important? People talk about carriers as having this trusted relationship, right? It's true. I trust my carriers. I trust all 5 of my different carriers that I have business relationships with. But more importantly, those carriers know things about my consumption that nobody else can know. They know where I'm located, they know when I'm using my phone, they know who I'm calling, and they have access to all of this information. As developers, we would like to be able to have access to that information. And there are a couple of ways you can do that. You can go through the device SDK and you can get all sorts of information for your app. And you can write an app that'll work on that device. Or you can go around that. And the around that is the thing that we're going to talk about today. By going around this, you actually go to the cloud. You're able, all of these other web services that can now become part of your app, and through those web services, you get access to that same set of information. So it's an alternative way to get information. For example, on my really, really smartphones, right? Take the Android. It knows where it's located because it has GPS. On my old Nokia phone that I loved so much, it was a feature phone. It didn't know where it was located, but the carrier would know where it was located. Unfortunately, I lost that phone, and now nobody knows where it's located. So, yeah, it was sad. So this all works if you have one carrier, but there are more than one carrier, right? There are a lot of carriers around. So the question becomes is how do we access all of these carriers' network gear? And you do that through web services that'll talk to each network provider, but then a unified network API that's going to actually arbitrate all of that among and across the different carriers. Alcatel-Lucent is starting to make steps in that direction. The Open API platform is a platform that we offer. It's a free service. You can get it through openapiservice.com. It is a new service. What I'd like you to ask you to think is think that it's 1980 and I want to talk to you about desktop publishing. Or think that it's 1985 and I want to talk to you about the World Wide Web. Or think that it's 1990 and I want to talk to you about cloud computing. Or that it's 1995 I want to talk to you about Y2K. We're talking about the next big thing. This isn't here today, or at least not here in full force, but it's coming for tomorrow. So what Alcatel-Lucent has been doing is a couple of things. We've been working on the technology side of it to expose network infrastructure for people like us to be able to write apps for. And we're also working on the business side of it such that we create a model where the carrier can participate in the revenue stream. So rather than just using the carrier like the water company or the electric company, right? I turn on my spigot, water runs out. That's how we're treating the carriers. The carriers actually have an opportunity to offer value to us and to be able to participate in the value chain. The Open API platform, and I won't go into a bunch of information about it, is one way that you can get apps out to the marketplace. It contains publishing suites, prototyping suites. It has analytics. I've come from a background the last few years involved in open source business intelligence, so I love analytics. The only report I haven't written is a report about what reports I write. The analytics package on here is huge. It shows you conversations. It shows you conversations by the authority of the source. And then it also shows your performance across a number of different app stores. So the analytics behind the Open API platform are actually really, really cool and probably enough of a reason that you'd want to be interested in it. Where does the Open API platform sit, though? And this is one view that we look at the developer ecosystem. On the far left of this is where we're traditionally operating today. If you have a relationship with BSNL, or you have a relationship with Bharti Airtel, or you have a relationship with Singtel, or with China Mobile, or whoever you're doing business with, you're probably dealing with it over in this corner. You have a stack of contracts that are as tall as I am. You've paid attorneys as much as you've paid developers, and you're negotiating and maintaining this massive business relationship, and probably everybody is making a lot of money. Unfortunately, that's only one small part of our economy, right? What we're interested in is the developer platform, where carriers are actually able to talk to developers and incite developers to write to their carrier infrastructure, or even with our Open API service, where we talk to a global community. And on the Open API service, we actually want to be able to create apps that can be distributed across this global marketplace that Srikanth mentioned. And that's increasing, right? That's happening more and more and more. So we talked about hackathons and we talked about different contests earlier. And these are a couple of hackathons that are going on. I was in Singapore a few weeks ago, and I met one of the very, very highly placed folks at Singtel. And he had started his presentation saying he had the best job in the world. And I was really confused because I told him, I said, I thought I had the best job in the world, and now you say you have the best job in the world. One of us has to be not telling the truth here, right? I have the best job in the world because I don't have the stress that he has, and yet I have the advantage of being able to go and talk to developers and introduce new concepts. We launched a hackathon in mid-October around this event. We've had 34 teams, 52 developers that are contributing apps towards this hack. I'm not sure where we're going to wind up at noon, quite frankly, because we still haven't gotten the apps in. I do know that it'll take me about 7 hours to build, compile, and test all of these apps. So we're probably not going to arrive at a winner today. But what I did want to mention is that depending upon the outcome of that contest today, we're also rolling it into some stuff that Bell Labs is doing in Bangalore. And if you're familiar with, you may be actually more familiar with Bell Labs than you are with Alcatel-Lucent. And Bell Labs obviously are a bunch of really, really smart people. They have an app contest that's going on across 3 different categories. You have a chance to win an iPad. I'll tell you, beyond a doubt, iPad is the coolest piece of technology that I own. I can't wait until the Atom tablet comes out, right? Because that's going to be even cooler. But this is the coolest piece of technology that you can get right now, and you can win one of them from Bell Labs. More importantly, if you're really, 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 really smart and you're a strong developer, you can get a job interview with Bell Labs. And that's even cooler. When I was in university, I thought I wanted to work for the Palo Alto Research Center because I figured if PARC was good enough for Steve Jobs to rip off ideas from, that it was good enough for me to work. And then I found out that PARC really didn't want me to work for them. So being able to promote and talk about the stuff that Bell Labs is doing is absolutely huge. There are details on this extremely long URL, and we can also talk after and I can give you more information. So the hack that we're doing, we want to focus around the APIs that we're exposing. We're exposing initially things like SMS and location, not terribly interesting, but we're also moving into things like quality of service and WCF. So with quality of service, you can imagine that if you work at home, you could come home, boot up your laptop, and say, I want my office laptop at home to have 90% of my bandwidth, so my VoIP line for my meetings from 6 p.m. until midnight are undisturbed, and my daughter, who's in the other room chatting with her friends, and my son, who's in the other room ripping music, only get 10% of my available bandwidth. So being able to control the traffic and delegate the traffic is the kind of environment that we're talking about. Building apps that let consumers do that interactively through the app is the kind of APIs that we're talking about. APIs are huge, right? And I won't go through the numbers, and if there's somebody here that's a lot better at math, or even a little bit better at math than I am, they're gonna get this. But if you look at the 2,000 APIs that were publicly available on programmable web, and you look at the growth rate that we've seen this year, it says that we're gonna exit this year somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000 publicly available web APIs. These are predominantly REST APIs. Even more telling are a couple of the numbers, for example, on Twitter. Right? 75% of all traffic is coming through their API, not through their website. That's huge. This is a very dramatic change that's going on, and it tells us that something very interesting is happening as APIs are exposed. I can tell you why open source companies expose APIs. I started 10 years ago working with the folks that did the Apache web server, and we started doing platforms to bring open source products to market. And you're familiar with these sites, openoffice.org, java.net, NetBeans, a number of these that you're familiar with. Srikanth had mentioned Tom Friedman. Tom came and interviewed Brian Behlendorf, the fellow who started the Apache project. And he called our company Flattener number 6, right? We were the arms dealer to the flattening trade because we provided that infrastructure. So what's happening with all of those infrastructure companies, or all these open source companies that are using that infrastructure, is the GPL license has changed. It's gotten more restrictive. It's harder to contribute to an open source project. Open source is moving up the stack. It's becoming more specialized. It's not broad-based. It's not an itch that everybody needs to be scratched like Bind or Apache or SendMail or Linux. It's becoming more specific like GIMP, right? How many graphic artists do you want writing code for you? Probably not a lot. Don't mind them doing the UI, but I don't want them writing the graphic design application. So what the open source companies are doing is they're starting to say, I'm going to expose my code through a set of very robust APIs, and you can contribute to the API, and that keeps my code base clean so that now I can have a dual mode license. So the open source side of the business is fueling APIs. People like Salesforce are fueling APIs because it drives consumption of their services. So everybody's charging towards this. And at the same time, you have convergence happening where carriers are exposing APIs. So the world is getting different, right? If you look at what carriers can provide, there are a lot of interesting services that they can publish out as APIs. And different carriers will be at different places in terms of how ready they are to expose these. They may be able to expose them through SOAP. They may not be able to expose them through REST yet. They may be able to expose them through Parlay or ParlayX, but they're not yet at REST. So with this, you have a lot of options. But then you have the options that the web developers are interested in dealing in. Programmable web lists a number of different APIs that you can access. If you think about this and you put the two of them together, you see that it creates an environment where you have now a rich palette of APIs that you can choose from. So I can take location from the carrier, mash it up with my prospect list in Salesforce, and generate a Google map that says, as you're driving to work, here are the prospects that you're passing that are on your 80% or better list, for example. So now it also creates opportunity, because in these gaps, we have the ability to abstract higher level of APIs. We have API mashups that can be created. If you do that, you generate great value. In fact, people are willing to pay between 2 and 3 times more for the capability when it comes in a bundle as opposed to when it comes standalone. And you see the reference here to this book, The Shift. I would encourage you to get it. And you can get it in a paperback copy. They'll send it to your house. And this is probably the end of the second run, so they may or may not be available. If they're not available, you can also get it onto your iBooks. And it's sitting on my iBook shelf right next to my free copy of Winnie the Pooh. Does anybody else have an iPad that came with Winnie the Pooh, by the way? Yeah. I'm not sure why they picked that one, but it's a nice book. But this book is better because this book's going to make you money. This book is going to actually share with you all of the research that we've done. And it's chock-a-block full of data and information about what's going on in this new space. So now you create this new world where we have this entirely new palette of APIs that we can choose from. And the plus plus becomes all of the device capability, right? Try as you want, try as you may, you're not going to be able to access the camera on an iPhone through a carrier API, right? You still need the device SDK, but you have the device capabilities, and they're getting more and more interesting. I mean, from the Android and the BlackBerry that fell on the floor, to the iPad that's here, to all of the new devices, the Android devices that are coming out. I'm heading to Hong Kong for the Mobile Asia Congress next week, so I'm going Android tablet shopping when I'm there, right? There's a whole new set of devices that are going to come out with all of this interesting capability. We're trying to nurture that ecosystem. In Mobile World Congress, we announced our API bundles. We announced this package support for APIs to be able to deliver greater value. We acquired Programmable Web and OpenPlug. Programmable Web is an API directory service at its base and now is moving into API analytics. OpenPlug is a cross-platform SDK as well as a low-end operating system for feature phones. So right now, we've been talking about smartphones that run apps. Feature phones are the majority of the phones in our market. How do we address those? Through OpenPlug, you're actually able, through Ellipse Suite, to be able to have an Android-like operating system that runs on a feature phone. And this is going to ship on a few million phones this year. So it's actually becoming a player. Ellipse Studio is a Flex-based SDK. You can write exceptions. So you can say all of this Flex stuff gets compiled into a native app for any one of Symbian or iPhone or Android or devices. Or you can write an exception that only gets compiled into the iPhone version so that you can actually truly write once and then run in multiple locations. Unlike a Java proposition, there's no runtime environment. Native apps are created through the OpenPlug Studio. There's OpenPlug literature around. It looks like this. The only difference being, in this corner, there's a 50% off sticker that's for everybody that's in this room. So if you're interested in OpenPlug or you need more licenses, buy it at half off. And if the guys told you that I gave you a discount on it, it was somebody else. The hackathon update is going to happen at noon. And so I don't have a whole lot more that I can say now other than the information that we've given on the entries. Predominantly, folks were looking at location and advertising as the APIs, and it was pretty evenly split between Windows and Android. So thank you very much. I'm around all day, and we have the session at noon where we're going to do a preview on the hackathon and look at some of the apps that have come in. So I appreciate your time. I enjoy being the last thing between you and coffee. And I appreciate everybody's attention before that. Thank you.